Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio with another solo mode review. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the solo mode for Excavation Earth from designers David Turtzi and Y Yi and publishers Mighty Board Games. In Excavation Earth, you play as a group of aliens who are coming to the Earth after it's been destroyed in some type of cataclysmic event, and you are excavating those artifacts that you are selling to interested buyers. Well, that's the theme. In effect, this is an economic market manipulation game. So let's head over to the table. I'm going to give you a very general, high-level overview of how the game plays. Then we'll come back here and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, here we see some of the components for the setup of Excavation Earth, the solo game. Now, this is not a complete setup by any means. I'm just really showing off many of the components here and giving you some reference points when I talk about particular actions and things along those lines. In the game, you are going to be playing as a faction, alien faction, and they're all slightly asymmetrical, and so all of them have their ability here and some art that are specific to their particular faction. But you're going to be playing as one of these factions going against Zoo, the clones. This is the solo AI board here. And the only solo specific components that are in the game are the board for Zoo here and these cards, okay? And I've got them all in their different types. And they're all going to be put together in a particular way for setup, where you are taking a certain number of each card and getting them ready. Here, the rule book shows you in round one, you're going to have 3 excavate cards, 2 market cards, 1 command, 1 sell, 2 snipe, and 1 survey. And you're going to do similarly for the second and third round. Then you're going to shuffle them all together, have the first round's deck go here, round 2 and 3 off to the side so that you can have them ready when those second and third rounds begin. And so I'll cut away here for a moment. I'll get it set up as if it were being the beginning of round 1, and then I'll kind of talk about the different actions that the solo bot will take. But just as a very general overview, because I'm not going to go into a heavy rules overview for this, you are, as a player, trying to excavate these artifacts that were left behind on Earth. And so you are moving about the board, you are sending out your envoys to different markets here so that you can sell to these customers who are interested in artifacts of particular types. So the purple buyers are interested in the purple artifacts. The white buyers out here are wild. They'll be interested in any type of artifact. Zoo here is also going to be putting traders out at these markets, selling, excavating, doing everything that a player would do. So let me cut away for a moment. I'll set up the deck as it's supposed to be, and then we'll go over the different actions. Okay, so now I've got Zoo's round 1 deck set up here, round 2 set up here, and round 3 set up here, as the rule book will kind of show you how to do it. And now let's just talk a little bit about how they take their actions and what they're going to do. On your turn, you're going to work as per normal. You're going to be perhaps referring to your player aid, showing you all the different actions you can make: traveling, excavating, market actions, selling, command, smuggle. The basic idea here is what you are trying to do is travel around the board to excavate these artifacts that have been left behind, and then hopefully selling them to interested buyers in these markets, trying to get the most credits, which are basically your points here, throughout the game. You're going to be doing this by manipulating what types of buyers are at the markets, things along those lines, trying to adjust the value of things that you are excavating and trying to sell. Now, Zoo's going to be doing generally the exact same thing as you. They're also going to be taking the same types of actions, but that's going to be determined by what cards they flip over in their deck. And so on your turn, you act as normal. On Zoo's turn, they're going to take 2 actions, and they're going to do that by flipping over cards one at a time. So, for example, they might excavate, okay? And there are a couple of different types of excavation cards. This one specifically says excavate 1 to 2 artifacts of the most popular color. And other times they'll tell you the most popular of a particular color. But in this case, it just said 1 to 2 artifacts of the most popular color, and you're going to refer to the market board to determine what is the most popular color, all right? If they have to choose between multiple colors that are tied, like in this case, red and orange, they're going to follow a priority system that is laid out here in the rule book. So you'll just kind of refer to this, although after you've played a few times, this priority system becomes somewhat second nature. It takes a little bit of time, or at least it did for me, but generally speaking, they follow a particular pattern because there are multiple places throughout the solo game where you're going to be referring to priority systems, and they have a whole section in the rule book about those priority systems. Things like where there might be the biggest influence swing, you would kind of follow this pattern. Where you're trying to determine the most lucrative market, you just would refer to this. And again, after you've done it a few times, it becomes pretty second nature to you. So excavating is how Zoo's going to be getting these artifacts onto their player board that they are then hopefully going to be selling. Well, maybe not hopefully for you, but hopefully for Zoo. They're going to be selling to these markets to get credits just like you are. All right. Now, every one of these excavate cards also has a smuggle action as part of it. And that is only evaluated if you're unable to excavate. So these cards kind of serve two purposes: either excavate, or if you're unable to, you smuggle, which is basically going to be going to the black markets. Okay? So that, in a nutshell, is excavate. Now, maybe they would do a market action. Assign 1 to 2 traders, each in a different market where Zoo has no traders, and add 1 wild buyer and 1 colored buyer to each market where they just assigned a trader. Buyer color equals their most popular artifact, then most of, and then random choice. And so again, these kind of have priority systems that are built in. And in this case, what they're going to be doing is they are going to be putting traders out to markets, in this case where they don't have them, all right, and adding wild buyers to the markets where they just put their traders, and then another colored buyer to a market where they did, and that's going to be bumping other buyers out, moving these down, and bringing out new buyers that are going to be related to what they have, because obviously they want to add interested buyers to the artifacts that they have, okay? And you, again, anytime you have questions, you do that by the priority system that is denoted in the rule book, okay? So that's the market. You're basically manipulating the buyers, putting out traders, because you have to have traders at markets you want to sell to, all right? That's market. Then we've got the command action, all right? Assign 1 trader to this market if Zoo has no traders there already, and assign 1 envoy to this command center. So this is like a specific market. It's saying assign a trader if it doesn't have one already, which in this case, it actually does have one there. But you're also assigning an envoy, to the command center, which is over here. So they would be also adding an envoy there, which is something that will allow them to have access to other powers at other points in the game. All right. Then we've got a sell action that they can possibly do, where they sell 1 to 3 artifacts at the most lucrative markets. Again, most lucrative market is going to be determined through a priority system that I showed you earlier. All right. It could also snipe. Sell 1 artifact at the market with the most buyers interested in artifacts of the color that Zoo has the fewest of. And then it also has a little priority thing there. If Zoo has no traders in that market, assign a trader first. So this is a way for them to kind of sneak in and sell underneath you. All right. Then we've got a survey action, which is drawing action cards, which are these cards here, that are going to allow them to add cubes to them. It's going to affect possibly turn order, among other actions. Now, if at any time Zoo is unable to perform the action that's listed on a card, it counts as a failed action, and instead, Zoo's going to get 10 credits. So if there's ever anything that they just absolutely cannot do, they're going to get 10 credits, which, again, is points. All right? So you're going to be going back and forth, taking turns. Zoo is going to be taking 2 of these turns, or 2 actions each turn, until they run out of actions, and then they're going to be passing. And if you pass, then it goes to end of round. And at the end of the round, you're going to be adding some cards from the previous round into this new deck, shuffling them all together and going again. So you're not going to have all of these cards added in to the second round deck. Same thing with round 3. All right. You continue doing this, going back and forth, excavating artifacts, manipulating the market, selling as much as you can, trying to get these lovely, lovely credits. And at the end of the game, if you've got more credits than Zoo, you win. Otherwise, Zoo will win. All right, well, that was, again, a high-level overview of the solo game. Let's head back over, and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, well, hopefully that gives you a general idea on how the solo game plays. It is an automa style with a deck of cards where you're going to be flipping them over twice per activation to determine what the AI is going to do. You do that over 3 rounds and determine who's got the most points. So the first thing I want to do is talk about some solo benchmarks. These are general things I like to consider when I'm looking at what solo games to take off the shelf and play. The first thing is win-loss condition. Is it a beat your high score type of a solo game, or are you playing against a virtual opponent? And in the case of Excavation Earth, you are clearly playing against an AI, Zoo, the clones. And so this is the type of game where I really think you needed to have an actual opponent that you were competing with on the board, trying to undercut the market, and the Zoo is going to be doing the exact same thing to you. It's a game with a lot of interaction points, and so for a solo game to work, I think you needed to have an AI opponent. So that worked out well in this particular game. The other thing I like to talk about is setup and teardown. That can oftentimes be a determining factor on solo gaming. Now, this is not a quick little filler game, and so there is a fair amount of setup and teardown, but it's commensurate to the type of experience you're getting. I mean, when I have an issue with setup that takes a long time, it's for a game that's over in 15 or 20 minutes, or doesn't really feel like you've done a whole lot besides set up the game. That's definitely not the case with Excavation Earth. It takes some time to set everything up, whether for a multiplayer or a solo game. It's not that much longer for a solo game. It's probably about the same, but you get a full experience, a full kind of game night experience. So I feel like it's a good ratio of setup and teardown to the time that you're spent actually playing the game. The other thing I do like to talk about is rules, and generally speaking, the rules in Excavation Earth are good. The solo rules are in a dedicated section at the back of the book, which if you can't have a dedicated solo rule book, which you can't always have, I suppose, then this is the way I like it, where it's very clear what is the solo rules and what is not. I also like that they give you a list of the actual components that are specific to the solo game. I think that when you have components that are only for the solo game, it's helpful to have them listed like they do here. There is somewhat of a learning curve, I would say, to the game in general. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that with the overall impression, but in the solo rules, you do have to understand that kind of priority system. And so I do like that they specifically talk, before they even get into the specific priority systems, they talk about it as a whole thing. Hey, this is how you're going to be thinking about priority when you have to make choices on behalf of Zoo. And so I like that they talk about it in a general sense, and then they get more specific as it applies to each of the actions. So a good job there. Okay, for art and components. Now, this to me is one of the most positive aspects of this game in general. I absolutely love the art. I think it is gorgeous, vibrant, bright. I think that you could have gone so many directions with a game like this. I mean, it's kind of it's a sci-fi theme in the sense that you are aliens, but it doesn't have that typical sci-fi feel to it. It's much more colorful, but it's not really cartoony. So it sets this really nice balance, I feel, between bright and vibrant and colorful, but without being cartoonish. I really just generally like it in general. I generally like it in general. There you go. The component quality overall is good. I did feel that the cards probably would have been better. I don't think there was a linen finish there, and that might have helped. But the cardboard is all good quality, thick. The board is very nice. The dual layer player boards and the market board and the Envoy board, although that's not what it's called, all being dual layered, are huge pluses in a game like this where you are moving cubes around and putting those kind of customers out. It's very helpful to have those, and it would have been, I think, for me, less of an experience, I think, because they're functional. They're not just nice to look at, they're functional. So very good there. I absolutely love screen printed wooden meeples. I've mentioned this in the past, and I really think that they look really striking in this game. So for your actual explorers that represent your alien faction, the screen printed meeples for those are really, really nice. I also appreciate that for the different buyers in the market that are differentiated by color, they're also differentiated by shape. So each of those different customers of the different colors has a different shape. And that's great. I would imagine that is helpful for colorblind players, although I don't know if it is mitigated in other aspects of the game, but I do like the fact that they took the time to have different kind of shapes for those different meeples. All right, so for my overall solo impressions. Now I'm going to start first about some things that maybe didn't work as well for me, and then talk about the things that I really did appreciate them. There is a relatively steep learning curve I've found to this game. This is in general, not just for the solo rules. And so when you take what is essentially a game that takes a bit of time to wrap your mind around, and then you're adding solo rules on top of that, I would just expect that if you're playing this game for the first time as a solo game, be prepared to refer to the solo book quite a bit. I actually played this first as a multiplayer game. However, it was on Tabletop Simulator, which almost for me doesn't count, but be that as it may, I feel like it helped me to play it first as a multiplayer game. If I had tried to learn it first as a solo game, I'm sure I could have. The rules are fine, but there's a bit of a cognitive load for myself. Now, speaking for you, maybe it won't be a challenge at all. I found it a bit challenging to pick up the overview of the flow of the game. The iconography can be confusing. I understand the desire for keeping it language independent, and iconography can oftentimes be nice shorthand, but there's a lot of iconography to keep track of in this game, and especially when you have conditional aspects as far as, for this action, you need to play a card of the matching color of the market you're in, but this action you don't. You just need to play any card, or you need to play a card that matches the icon, not the color. The iconography is all there, and it makes intuitive sense to an extent when you're looking at it, but it's not so much that I'm just like, yes, I understand, I remember what that is. I had to play a few games before that iconography really kind of latched into my muscle memory, this muscle memory up there. And so you just have to be aware of that. The game, I found, both multiplayer and solo, has a bit of a procedural feel, okay, where you feel like you're kind of mentally going down this almost spreadsheet type of thing. Now, it's an economic game at heart, and so many economic games I've found have that kind of procedural feel. But I feel like it's a little bit more emphasized in the solo game, because not only are you going through these kind of procedural steps for your own actions, now you've got the AI, and they've got additional procedural aspects to keep in mind, mostly through that priority system, okay? So those are some things that I think you need to be aware of when determining whether this is going to be a solo game for you. On the positive end, I feel like if you do kind of stick that out, if you stick with it, if you play it enough that you kind of internalize a bit of the rule set and the iconography especially, I think you're going to find a very enjoyable market manipulation economic solo game. And I feel like that fills a very particular niche. I can't think offhand of a large number of economic market manipulation games for a solo player. And I like that. I always feel like it's something that speaks well and kind of gives it a little bit of a leg up if it's not in a very crowded space. You know, I love worker placement games, and there are fantastic solo worker placement games, but there's a lot of them. I love solo puzzle type games, and there's a ton of those. There's not a lot of solo market manipulation economic games, and so that's something that I really appreciate and feel like it definitely is a mark in the positive end there. I also really enjoy the theme. I really, as I mentioned before, like the art, and I like I like exercising that kind of economic part of my brain. I don't do that often in games. I'm very hit or miss with economic games, and this is one that does work for me because I feel like the market manipulation is very, it doesn't seem to be too clouded in obscurity. In other words, I can very clearly see what I need to do, what I want to do to get these particular type of buyers for my artifacts. And so this kind of allows me to do things that I feel are clever in the market manipulation, and I really do like that. So overall, I feel like Excavation Earth is a solid solo economic game. I'm giving it a 7.5 out of 10, a seal of approval. I do feel like some of the aspects I mentioned keep it a little bit lower from getting into that excellent spot. You know, I do feel like there's a procedural feel and there's a bit of a learning curve for sure. But overall, if you are interested in this type of a market manipulation game, an economic game as a solo player, and you feel like maybe this is something that's missing in your collection, this is definitely one that you might want to check out. All right, well, that's it for me. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from Dice Tower headquarters.